All right. Hello, you beautiful people. I am doing my presentation on parental alienation. Let me see if I can show you all this. There it is. Beautiful. Beautiful. And I really hope you enjoy. This is an issue that is near to my heart, and I hope you enjoy. So, what is parental alienation? Well, it is not an alien as a parent, although some of our parents act like aliens, but that's okay. It's a phenomenon. It's a social phenomenon, and it exists in 1% of total divorce cases in the USA, which is 10% of high conflict divorce cases, 7 to 10,000 annual cases in the USA. It involves a cross-generational coalition between a parent and a child. Cross-generational coalition. It serves to destroy a child's relationship with an affectionately available, normal-range parent. So, I said it was a phenomenon. Parental alienation is not a clinically recognized term. When we say parental alienation, we're just talking about what Richard Gardner liked to call it. So, 4 decades have passed since 1985 when Richard Gardner wrote about it, and they've been working to give us no DSM-5 designation for the pathology that presents itself in parental alienation. Dr. Craig Childress states it rather revolutionarily, that pathogenic parenting refers to the creation of a psychopathology in a child through aberrant and distorted parenting practices. This is what we're seeing in parental alienation. Pathogenic parenting. This involves a cross-generational coalition, which in addition to narcissistic or borderline personality constitutes as severe parental alienation. Otherwise, it's mild or moderate parental alienation. So we're going to look at it from a psychological approach, a legal approach, and a familial approach. Who is the alienating parent in the family? So when there's a divorce, one of the parents is triggered. They have attachment trauma history from when they were a child that has developed into a narcissistic or borderline personality, which tends to have a psychopathic tilt. So they have likely engaged in this marriage so that they can have an opinion, or so that they can have others have an opinion of them that is good. They like to have other people see them as great people. So that's likely why they're in the marriage. That's just my speculation. But when they decompensate, it is a inability for them to develop effective coping mechanisms. So they rely on delusions, actually, instead of becoming self-reflective, taking responsibility for what happened in their marriage, accepting it, and moving on. They become bitter and resentful, forming delusions which are rooted in their attachment trauma history, which involves them superimposing roles from their childhood trauma onto their current relationships. So the roles of like a victim, an abusive parent, not the narcissist, totally not the narcissist. Obviously, it has to be the other parent, otherwise the narcissist would look bad. And the narcissist will claim to be the saving, nurturing parent. And as you can see up there in the top right corner, they only really care about themselves. They're rather psychopathic as well. And Oftentimes it doesn't last long, but a lot of the times, I think in some parents, they can actually keep the facade going for, well, a long, long time. And it's very sad. But how does this affect the child? The child's number one symptom is a dysfunctional attachment system. This is an inborn instinct that children have to love and be close to and protected by their parents. That's a natural born instinct. And the only time when a child rejects one of their parents is through this cross-generational coalition, which is psychologically abusive to the child. The child who once loved their parent will become arrogant towards the parent whom they loved. They will elevate themselves above the parent. They have the sense of entitlement, a lack of empathy, and they view that parent as all bad when they view their other parent, who is conditioning their beliefs, feeding them the information to make them think that they believe that their normal range, affectionately available parent is an abusive villain, essentially. So this effect that it has on the children affects not just relationships with one of their parents, but it also affects their expectations in all of their relationships. They have negative effects to the way that they handle losing relationships, and negative effects to the way that they form new relationships, because these are all the things that our attachment system does. When this is dysfunctional, we have issues doing that. Now, Dr. Craig Childress points out that the only time that a child will reject a parent is when there's psychological manipulation involved. Otherwise, even in cases of bad parenting, this causes a insecure attachment in the child, which results in the child wanting to be closer and fixating on the relationship with their bad parent. Never, really, does a child alienate one of their parents unless there's something like sexual abuse going on. That would be reasonable, good, solid grounds for alienating your parent. Or being estranged from your parent. Leaving them, not having a relationship with them because they're causing you harm or causing the child harm. So this psychological conditioning that the narcissistic or borderline personality disorder parent will utilize is through directive questioning, social pressure, to get the child to first criticize the other parent. Alienating parent will say, "Really? It was okay. What do you mean it was okay?" And sort of like cold, or, in subtle ways showing that the child just gave the wrong answer, and the child will sort of give in to the manipulative tactics of the narcissistic parent, and they'll say, "Well, it was a little boring." And the narcissistic parent will blow it out of proportion. They'll say, "Well, how could they be boring? I thought they loved you. I mean, don't they know that they only get to see you, half the time? Why couldn't they make some special time for you to have fun and not be bored? I mean, that seems kind of wrong, don't you think?" And the child will be sort of like, again, pressured into giving the right answers to the child, or to the man-child, the adult child, the alienating parent. And so this then allows the alienating parent to be supportive of the child's views. The child adopts a victim role which is being victimized by the normal range affectionately available parent, and that automatically paints the narcissistic or borderline parent as nurturing. So, in young children especially, this is a phobia, because children will become hyper anxious around a normal parent because they have been told, or the alienating parent has indicated to the child that this parent is now a threat to them. And it's completely illogical. It is fear, and it is a phobia. So, what is the professional psychological approach in dealing with this phenomenon? They are tasked with figuring out what the environment is like for the child, what the parenting approach is of the parents, if the parents are healthy enough and fit, qualified to parent their children. This is to aid the court in ruling in custody disputes in the best interest of the child. That's what it says on paper. What do they actually do? Is they go and they create reunification camps. A lot of the times when they identify parental alienation, they send children to child-parent reunification camps to strengthen the relationship, to repair a rift between a parent and its child. I love that they say its, not their. Parents are objects, cash cows. There's all of these different aspects of this phenomenon that are in the DSM-5. Trauma, attachment system, delusional beliefs, personality disorders, narcissistic and borderline. Those are all in there, and those are all central key elements of parental alienation, yet psychologists in 4 decades have done no work in collaborating together to actually designate the pathology that is present in parental alienation into the DSM-5. So those reunification camps act in the best interest of the child to help the courts decide on custody disputes where the child can go based on established psychological guidelines. As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, these are the reunification therapy guidelines and the diagnostic guidelines. I know, they're very robust. This is Allie Cable's testimony of her experience with reunification camps.
I was 16, my sister and I were kidnapped from a courthouse in Johnson County, Kansas, separated and transported to a remote city in Montana. Here, we were held captive in a hotel and threatened into a relationship with our abusive father through a forced reunification camp called Family Bridges. When we were taken from the courthouse, all of our things, including our phones and our clothes, were confiscated from us, and we were shoved out the back door of the courthouse by 2 transport agents and security guards. My sister and I were put into separate cars, and I didn't see her again until we got to Montana. We weren't allowed to ask any questions about where we were going or what we would be doing. Our case manager was there at the courthouse, and he told us to just go along with it and just do what they say. Throughout the trip, I was terrified. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I could barely stop shaking. And when we got to Montana, it was so much worse than I even imagined. Randy Rand, Kathleen Rock, and Kelly Voyage ran our program and forced us to participate in a 4-day workshop where we had to denounce our mom and say that we loved our abuser. We were forced to share a hotel room with our abuser, and we had no privacy. We weren't allowed to shut any doors, including the bathroom door, and we were coerced into saying that our safe parent, our mom, had brainwashed us into believing that we were abused. The program leaders placed a moratorium on history, and we weren't allowed to talk about the abuse or anything that happened before we came to the camp. They made us feel like if we told anyone, not only would we be punished, but no one would believe us anyway. The program leaders told us that if we didn't participate in the workshop, we'd be sent to wilderness camps, psychiatric facilities, or foster care. They told us that my sister and I would be separated and that we wouldn't see each other or our mom again until we each turned 18 if we chose this option. They forced us to write a letter to our mom saying that we wanted to go to a wilderness camp or psychiatric facility instead of going along with their program, which meant going to live with our abuser. I remember at one point during the workshop, I was visibly depressed, and the leaders pulled me aside and told me I wasn't working hard enough at the program. They said that if I wasn't excited about living with my abuser, then the no contact order would be extended. To top it all off, after the 4 days, the leaders forced us to fill out a feedback form about our experience at Family Bridges while they were looking over our shoulders. The only way to survive living with our abuser was to pretend that we were happy and that we were believing everything that they said. My story is not unique, and Family Bridges and forced reunification camps like it continue to terrorize kids and facilitate abuse. Please support CJE Youth Speak if you can, and thank you for watching.
Yes. Thank you, Allie Cable, for sharing your testimony and your experiences. I just want to highlight the statistic that she shows here, that it is an institutionalized silencing of victims and obstruction of justice that is a $28 billion annual industry for the family court industry. For the family court system, why is it that a family court attorney can make a living, can eat, and have all of their needs provided for, working a single job as a family court attorney? When they're not even providing. This is the thing that gets me. They operate in the names of serving the best interest of the public and providing. They are working in the best interest of the child in all family custody disputes. And their science for reunification therapy for parental alienation is non-existent. There's no designation for the pathology that exists in it. They're just shooting in the dark when it comes to identifying it. And Allie Cable's experience, and I love this quote before I get into that actually, that Dr. Childress says, if any therapist says that he or she does reunification therapy, run. They say there's no empirical way to differentiate between manipulated induced accusations and real accusations. In Allie Cable's case, she was sexually assaulted by her father shortly after her parents were divorced, and when she told the case manager, they assumed that she was accusing her father because she had been cued by her alienating mother, and she was sent to this reunification camp and forced to be in therapy with her sexually abusive father. And they have a $28 billion annual incentive to change nothing, right? They're getting paid a lot of money. That's a lot of money that is just being extracted from families. We realize this. We talk about wealth inequality in this country. How about the thievery of our institutions that are just siphoning $28 billion out of our families every year, and they love to do it. They have no reason to change what they are doing. If you were making $28 billion doing this, would you change? Well, surely you would, watching this, because you're moral. But how could you expect them to do this? When it comes to what happened in the courtroom, there is a clear inherent bias when it comes to the use of parental alienation. Parental alienation is often not something that we hear about, but court attorneys, family attorneys, know it very well because when they cross-claim parental alienation, chances are the judge will listen to them. So mothers will come to court. They say, I want to divorce my husband, and he's committed crimes of domestic violence against me. And if there's no parental alienation cross-claim, they're believed 59% of the time in those domestic violence allegations, which is reduced to 23% of the time when there is a parental alienation cross-claim. And this is a defense for fathers. It's not a defense for mothers, and I could only speculate as to why that is. Fathers are seen as physically abusive, less likely to be emotionally or psychologically abusive. So, when a mother is going to be abusive, she would have to be psychologically abusive or emotional abusive. She cannot be physically abusive. So the court is much more likely to believe that a woman is an alienating parent, more so than a father, because of that fact. It has absolutely no basis in reality, because how are you going to fluctuate your decisions by 35% on alienation cross-claims when it's only present in 1% of cases? I mean, that seems really disproportionate. I understand there's probably more to these statistics than I'm reading into. These are statistics that are from court opinions, but it seems rather disproportionate and biased against women, mothers who traditionally are seen as the more fit parents. I mean, how many people hire babysitters that are men? 0% of smart people. So in other words, parental alienation is a term that comes about in courtroom lawfare. Judges are more likely to place custody in abusive... Actually, no, I won't say that. 14% of the time, judges place children in the custody of fathers who are determined to be physically abusive. Everybody in the courtroom knows that these fathers are physically abusive. 14% of the time, they get custody of the children for a number of reasons, but it is likely that the mother is seen as an alienating parent, which means in some cases, a judge would rather put children in the custody of a physically abusive father than an alienating parent, an alienating mother. Why would a judge prioritize in any case, the importance of keeping the children away from an alienating parent when there is no science to determine what an alienating parent even is, and they all have determined that the other parent is physically abusive? It makes no sense. I want to talk about Richard Gardner because he's crazy. It's true. Read some of his books, or don't. I would recommend not, because he talks a lot about sexuality and how different forms of sexuality are good for the human race, and that pedophilia is not intrinsically reprehensible, although he finds it reprehensible. Now, I wonder how reprehensible he finds it, because he recommends in therapy sessions that somebody, a father who comes in who is determined to have raped or sexually abused their child, be affirmed and their self-esteem strengthened, bolstered, while downplaying the hysterics, calls them hysterics, of the mother who is in the therapy session about what her husband may be doing. So everybody in the therapy session knows that the father has sexually abused the child of these two parents the mother is deemed hysterical and the father's self-esteem should be bolstered. Why? Because there are all these societies all around the world that accept pedophilia as a part of their society. They don't condemn it the same way that the Western Judeo-Christian societies do, which means that they are merely unlucky to have been born in a Judeo-Christian society, and that their actions, if done in another part of the world, would be totally normal. He also wrote about how forms of sexuality such as necrophilia and zoophilia, all these other kinds of horrible perversions of man, are actually good because they support the reproduction of the human species. That's Richard Gardner, and he actually laid the foundation for parental alienation in 1985. He outlined 8 criteria for identifying parental alienation, which on the surface may seem like, oh yeah, this is what's happening in parental alienation, but they're non-codified terms. They're totally subjective in some areas, and it has led to a great amount of confusion and the perpetuation of an issue that should very easily scientifically be proven to be pathogenic parenting, psychological abuse from an alienating, narcissistic, or borderline personality parent. These things should be scientifically provable 100% of the time. And psychologists have not done the work to codify their terminology. And legal professionals have put way too much trust in the psychologists. It's mind-blowing. It really is mind-blowing. And one of the other things that is mind-blowing, I just want to say, is that the statistics that I was reading about the use of guardian ad litems, and there was a huge bias against mothers when GALs were in the court opinions. So why would GALs would convince judges to rule against mothers? Now, I'm just going to share from my own personal experience for a moment, because I didn't think about this when I first saw it, but after seeing that 84% of GALs are women, most of the other psychological evaluators are women, siding with recently divorced husbands. They're dealing with people who are male psychological manipulators. They have had wives, they have had children, they know women. Why would it be 3 to 5 times more likely for a father to win custody of the children when a GAL influences the judge's opinion, other than a romantic attraction between the recently divorced father and this female or sexually oriented towards males guardian ad litem? From my own personal experience, the guardian ad litem that was working in my parental alienation case was certainly being psychologically manipulated by my handsome, alienating father. Even if, there were moments where she snapped out of it. There were times where we recognized that she's laughing really hard at what he has to say and flirting with him at times in the driveway. And, how often is that really happening? And we want to talk about patriarchal oppression. Well, how about women on women oppression? I mean, that's what this is. And it's really disturbing to think that that might be the case, but I'd love to hear other answers. Now, when it comes to this about domestic violence and claims, it is stated that the reasonable course of action is to determine how often women are actually lying. Yes, scientifically determine how often women are actually lying about their domestic violence claims to show whether or not the court is guessing or if they're actually doing a fairly decent job in hammering out the situation. Based on what I've experienced and what thousands of other families have experienced and the financial incentive and the zero science that supports parental alienation, diagnosing it, and treating it, I would be very likely to hypothesize that the legal system is really not doing its due diligence in these cases. This is the kind of professional accountability that we are getting.
Every crab's goal in life is to make $1 million! And now I got mine! Congratulations, sir! You have just given me my $1 million!
Huh, great. What do I win?
Nothing! Now get out!
What?
Get out! Everybody get out! You're spoiling me moment! $1 million!
All right. Thank you so much for joining me today and listening to my presentation on parental alienation. I hope you learned something and that it helped you. And I just want to share something that I was thinking about this from a philosophical perspective, this issue of parental alienation. I was thinking that we are God's children, first and foremost, and it's necessary that we have a relationship with Him. I think to the degree that we want a relationship with our children, God wants a relationship with us, and even more so. But that longing for our child to return to us is what God feels about us, about each and every one of us. And God has been so faithful throughout my life to rescue me from painful experiences that would have resulted in my death, including parental alienation. And I am so thankful that I have endured these kinds of painful experiences, because otherwise I wouldn't have gotten to know God to the degree that I have. And that is worth everything. My mother often says that I deserved a better childhood than I got, and she may be right, but I would have definitely chosen to have a awesome relationship with God that is personal and loving than worldly comfort. And getting to know Him has been the greatest treasure. It's worth more than all of the money in the world combined. Not even close. It's not even close to the loving embrace of Jesus Christ that heals every wound and every trauma of our heart. So yes, please recognize that God wants a relationship with you. And according to your faith, it will be done unto you. A relationship with God will allow God to say what He knows. He will speak into your life and He will say, "Don't you know that I know all of the things that you're going through? Give your worries to me, and I will take care of them." And so this parental alienation, in a way, is kind of like our spiritual relationship with God, because God is a loving Father. He is our Abba. And we are manipulated to reject Him so often. But when we turn to Him and we say, "Abba, Abba, I want to be close to you. He draws near to our hearts. And he says, I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. And he never stops. And he says it in new ways every day. And according to your faith, it will be done unto you. And I believe 100% that God is going to restore your family. And he will restore your relationship with your children. 100-fold of what the enemy took from you will be restored to you. But first, you need to acknowledge that you are first God's child, and he will reach into your life, and the enemy will no longer have authority to cause you pain and suffering. Not only will your children be a blessing to you and your family, but they will be a blessing to the Lord. They will be a blessing to Jesus' heart, and they will be a blessing to God's heart. And to the world, they will become great pillars in this world. So I love you. God loves you. Jesus definitely loves you. Until next time. Bye-bye.